Now, India has strongly condemned the demolition of the Khilkhet Durga Temple in Dhaka. It has also criticized the role of the Muhammad Yunus-led interim government in allowing the destruction and projecting it as a case of illegal land use. External Affairs spokesperson Randhir Jaiswal said that this is a matter of a grave concern that such incidents continue to reoccur in Bangladesh. It is the responsibility of the interim government of Bangladesh to protect Hindus, their properties and their religious institutions.
We understand that extremists were clamoring for demolishing the Durga Temple in Khilkhet, Dhaka. The interim government, instead of providing security to the temple, projected the episode as illegal land use and they allowed the destruction of the temple today. This has resulted in damage to the deity before it was shifted. We are dismayed that such incidents continue to reoccur in Bangladesh. Let me underline that it is the responsibility of the interim government of Bangladesh to protect Hindus, their properties and religious institutions.
Earlier this week, authorities in Bangladesh razed a makeshift Durga temple in Dhaka as part of a demolition drive. Authorities said temple was built on railway land and alleged it was illegal. The temple was bulldozed on Thursday in the presence of a huge number of police and security personnel, and this triggered widespread outrage and condemnation from the Hindu community. Reports suggest that the temple was razed based on the order issued by the Deputy Commissioner and Divisional Estate Officer of Dhaka, Division of Bangladesh Railways. Hindu women and men sat in front of the temple and protested, but they were removed by the army personnel. The Bangladesh Sammilit Sanatani Jagran Jyote called for a protest in Dhaka's Shahbag area against the temple demolition. And to discuss this further, I'm joined by an esteemed panel of guests this morning. I'm joined by Suhas Chakma, who's the Director of Rights and Risks Analysis Group. I'm also joined by Adit Kothari, who's a Foreign Affairs expert. Well, good morning to both of you. Thank you for taking our time and joining us here on this very significant subject that we have a close watch at News9. I will first come across to you, Mr. Chakma. How do you look at these episodes unfolding one after the other in Bangladesh, and the Yunus-led government cannot absolve itself of responsibility? It happened 2 weeks ago when it came to how the home of Rabindranath Tagore was attacked in Sirajganj in Bangladesh, and 2 weeks later, this Durga temple has been destroyed. There seems to be a design, Mr. Chakma.
No, not a design. I think Dr. Muhammad Yunus is an integral part of the Islamic fundamentalists in the country to destroy anything which is not connected with the majority Muslims. So whether it's the Durga temples or the Buddhist temples, etc., are being attacked. And he has adopted one policy. That policy is to say that these are mob violence, or these are things which is done by people spontaneously and the state cannot control. So in a way, he absolves the entire responsibility of the state, as if the state doesn't have any kind of responsibility towards protection of the rights of the minorities. So that's what he is doing. The second part, which we have seen in the Chittagong Hill tracts of Bangladesh, where the tribals are, for example, in the Sajek area, which is a reserve forest area, the Muslims are being allowed to build mosques in the reserve forest area, and where there are no Muslims whatsoever. Only few tourists from Dhaka and elsewhere or Chittagong might go there and visit it. So in order to Islamize the entire Chittagong Hill tracts, they are allowing construction of the mosque in the places where there are no Muslims even. But you would see that in the case of Dhaka, they will say that this is a particular temple which was built on the railway land. If a temple on the railway land is illegal, obviously temple in the reserve forest area is absolutely illegal, but they are completely allowing all these things. And I think I think international community suffers some kind of an inertia. It is as if it is attack on the minorities in Pakistan or Bangladesh, if we raise the issue here, and then of course, it's a serious issue, that kind of thing. I think we appreciate this stand taken by the Ministry of External Affairs, because across the world, I think the violations against the Hindu minorities in Bangladesh is not being taken very seriously. It's as if the Nobel laureate has no role. Nobel laureate is the prime minister of the country. And each time, not only in these cases, in all cases, he just expresses regrets and ask people not to take law in their own hands. He always forgets the fact that the law has to take its own course, and when it comes to the Hindus, Buddhists, and other minorities, of course, the law is never followed, and that's why there is complete lawlessness. When the chief advisor himself, allows or doesn't go beyond expressing regret, what could you say? So it's not one day. From day one, please remember, on 5th September 2024, before any inquiry, he had said the attacks on the Hindu minorities are not religiously motivated, but they are motivated because of the political allegiance of the Hindus with the Awami League. So from that day till today, he follows the same strategy, that any attacks on the Hindus is not a question of attacks on the religious minorities. It's law taking its own course, etc. We have nothing to do with it. If certain individuals go and take actions when they are hand in glove with the authorities.
Absolutely, Mr. Chakma. Mr. Adit Kothari, time and again we have seen how Bangladesh has tried to ask India to come on the talking table. They want the Ganga Water Treaty to also be renewed. But given the circumstances now, while India has made it very clear that these attacks on minorities and their sentiment cannot be accepted, do you think that it is time that India takes a firm stand that they're only going to hold talks with Bangladesh on issues that are going to concern both the nations in a conducive environment where Yunus government will have to do certain course corrections?
I think, Samia, if you look at it in entirety, the Indian government has been very lenient with its Bangladeshi counterpart. The Ganga Treaty is one of them, but the other one is also, on the borders between India and Bangladesh, we have something called the Non-Lethal Treaty Pact, which basically curbs and limits the ability of the BSF to mitigate any of the illegal infiltration from Bangladesh by not allowing them to use any legal weapons as a means to basically deter them. So all of those kind of treaties which were prior to the 5th September 2024 need to be done away with, which the Indian government hasn't shown that kind of reciprocity so far. I mean, this particular demolition that we're talking about of the Durga Temple in Dhaka is just not an attack on a structure, but it is purely an attack on the faith, on the culture and the dignity of the Hindus who actually live in Bangladesh, which is extremely pathetic and sad. Instead of providing security to this particular community, the marginalized community in Bangladesh, the Yunus government is trying to project this as some sort of use of illegal land where it is not, because the temple, has a history. It has pre-existed for a very long time. And, they are trying to basically pander to the Islamists. I'm going to quote something by Abdul Barkat. He's a professor at the Dhaka University, who says that within 30 years, because of the rate by which the Hindus of Bangladesh are basically leaving the country, there will be no Hindus left in Bangladesh in about 30 years. Each day there are roughly about 774 Hindus which are leaving Bangladesh as of today, which is far greater than what it was prior to 1971. 1971, it was around 705 Hindus leaving Bangladesh each day. So, the international community has definitely shown a sense of blind spot, but that blind spot also transcends into India in some shape and form. There are so many incidents that we do not actually talk about, the kind of excesses that the Hindu community has had to endure as a consequence of living in Bangladesh. One of them being the Golaghat massacre, where 437 merchants belonging to the Marwari community in Bangladesh were forced to flee in the 1971 unrest. The men were basically segregated into the bogies and the women were segregated into different bogies. The men were, of course, barbarically killed, but the women were brutally raped. The children were flung into the air, and they were basically killed in a very pungent manner by the Razakars and the Pakistani army. So, these kind of things do not make it into the mainstream media or into the academic circles in India, which basically demonstrates the clear sort of blind spot that we have on a subject which is Bangladesh, which should be a very contentious subject. But, having said that, Samia, we also need to look at West Bengal, which is also a very similar case to Bangladesh, where there are regular encroachments happening under the guise of the Waqf board due to the powers extended to the Waqf board in 2013. As a consequence, many of the acres of Hindu land is now being lost to the Islamists. Samia.
Absolutely. We can't really overlook the fact that Bangladesh shares its border with West Bengal, and there seems to be a ripple effect of what happens in one state ends up having its reflection in the other. But Mr. Chakma still continues to be with us. Mr. Chakma, like Mr. Kothari was saying, that India's response really hasn't managed to drive home a point to Bangladesh so far, where India needs to talk tough. What ideally should be India's response to these ongoing, consistent, unrelenting attack on Hindu minorities in Bangladesh, their faith, the areas of worship, and also, like I mentioned, 2 weeks ago, it was Rabindranath Tagore's ancestral home, and today we are talking about a Durga temple being demolished.
Well, I think, unfortunately, India's position has not been firm and consistent, and India has not been able to chalk out or firm up its policy on Bangladesh. I think the key point is you had engaged with the government of Bangladesh up to a certain point of time. That's perfectly all right. But at this point of time, if you look at the Yunus government, it is obviously not a government which has any kind of legitimacy, because the term of the interim government is only 6 months. So now, after a period of 6 months, if you still continue to engage with a government which doesn't hold elections, I don't think you are taking a firm position. I think the government of India needs to completely disengage with the government of the day, saying that we will deal with the government when there is an election and an elected government comes up. So that sends a clear message, because the position of India, it has to be and is different from the other countries, because they are not as much as affected. So India need not necessarily follow the other countries like in the European Union or United States or even China, because they are not neighbors of Bangladesh. And now that you have Sheikh Hasina and her political party leaders in the country, I think the least the government of India could do is that, we will not engage with the government, because by engaging with Yunus, by sending him greetings on the Eid or etc., you are giving the legitimacy which he doesn't deserve. So in a way, the government of India's legitimacy being given to the interim government is, at the end of the day, becoming counterproductive. I think if India disengages with the interim government, saying that we will only deal with the government once there's an elected government which comes with the mandate of the people, I think the international community will be forced to take that position. And at this moment, what we are struggling is our entire struggle to show that this government has no legitimacy. It has no accountability whatsoever. It can do whatever it does. Even despite being an interim government, it is taking decisions which even a regular government would have found it very difficult. So if you do not take a firm position with the interim government, saying that you are not somebody who is legitimate, then you do not send a message. I think if India takes that position, I am quite sure people from the international community will come around and say, yes, this is a government which we should not be dealing with. Because at the end of the day, we can, point out to the international community that the Constitution of Bangladesh does not allow an interim government beyond 6 months. So why should we deal with an illegal, unelected government? So that message, I think, from India has not come out very clearly. And that's why many of these atrocities take place. And episodic statements from the MEA, they are useful. But we are not sending home the point which needs to be sent at this point of time, even to ensure that the elections are free and fair.
Very interesting point raised over there, Mr. Chakma. And I'll take that question across to Mr. Kothari. Mr. Chakma is saying that India has to disengage with Bangladesh to try and drive home a point that this is not going to be accepted. In the name of diplomacy, we cannot hold talks while you're going to be carrying out these acts. Do you think it's important for India now, just like they did it yesterday? It was Defense Minister Rajnath Singh at the SCO summit who named and shamed Pakistan for trying to, provide a safe haven for terrorists, and then the terrorism is unleashed on India. It's time for India to name and shame Bangladesh at international forums so that there is a global condemnation for incidents like these, because Bangladesh cannot get away with this with impunity.
Tamia, forget the global condemnation. That's never coming, because, all of this, what we see in Bangladesh is basically engineered by the West. So, they are not going to come and condemn this. What India needs to do is something that I agree with Mr. Chakma. I think he's made a very valuable point there, that, India needs to recognize that this government is an illegitimate government, and it needs to put a point across by ensuring there is absolutely no contact that they establish diplomatically, and every sort of contact that they need to have is basically held after the elections are held, after a new government has been sworn in by the will of the people. Because at this point, Muhammad Yunus is there at the behest of the Western regime. He is not there at the behest of the people. So that messaging is very important to be sent out, which we haven't done so far. I mean, our diplomatic overtures have somewhere or the other recognized his regime as a legitimate one by the sheer amount of contact level that we've had with Bangladesh. But going back to a different point now, the Vested Property Act of 1971 in Bangladesh is something that is often overlooked, and the implementation of this is seen as a massive factor in what is happening in Bangladesh today. I mean, just on 21st of June, while this particular incident happened on the 24th, on the 21st of June, another 1400-year-old Shiv Mandir in Komila district called Lalmai Hills was basically attempted to be encroached by a Muslim man. And he built a shanty around a 600-acre land, claiming that this was his ancestral property. Ultimately, the unison of the various communities there forced this man to flee. But had the community not shown some amount of strength, he would have been very successful to basically ensure that this would have been added to another list of properties that was basically vacated. At this point of time, there are more than 2.6 million hectare of land which previously belonged to the Hindus is now being encroached by beneficiaries of either the Awami League or the BNP in Bangladesh. And this is all due to the Vested Property Act of 1971. This was repealed in 2001, but very little has been done by successive Bangladeshi governments to ensure that the correct sort of land has been given back to its rightful owners. So, things like this is basically propelling the Hindus of Bangladesh to be further marginalized into corners and flee the country, either for India or for other pastures. Samia.